And what we learned about biblical kings is that earthly kings and agendas were only temporary. And often, when we study the Bible, these kings found themselves turning to sin and idolatry and rebellion against God. Also, when we look at earthly kings according to the Bible and we look at the history, according to biblical texts, people often follow the patterns of the kings. People often follow the patterns of the kings. So, for an example, in the Bible, there's a king called Ahab, and he was married to a lady named Jezebel. Y'all hear that? Jezebel. Y'all have heard that before. Well, Ahab began to follow his wife Jezebel into idol worship of a pagan god called Baal, into idol worship, into all kind of debauchery, sexual immorality, sin, killing. All of these things were going on. And so as King Ahab did, the nation of Israel followed his pattern, and they got in big trouble with God because people, according to history, it just happens. They follow the pattern of the king, and especially with biblical history, they follow the pattern of the king. So then, if we have Trump lifted up as a King Cyrus, and Trump openly declares that he hates, well, then it's natural to follow the conclusion that if he hates, those that follow him and take ownership of him as their king will begin to follow the pattern of hate. And we see that happening even today. I was looking on the news. I watched a couple of news segments, a couple of news segments, and a couple of news segments I've seen on one of the news outlets, and one of the hosts, because Trump, as their King Cyrus, Trump met with the United Nations. And when he met with the United Nations, the elevator was broken and his teleprompter was broken. You've probably seen this on the news when it happened. It was all over the news. Well, one of the Fox hosts said, we need to bomb the United Nations. Now, why would you want to bomb the United Nations over an escalator being broken and a teleprompter being broken? Why is that your first response? And many of them proclaim to be Christians. So why is your first response to bomb the United Nations because of a broken teleprompter? Well, if you're following the pattern of the king who has hate in his heart and only wants to see his enemies, that he don't want them to see him do well, well, then it's natural that those that follow the king, if something goes wrong according to the king whom they worship, they want bad things to happen to him. Hate. I saw another news host say that they wanted to kill homeless people. They were talking about what to do with the homeless people. And he said, just kill them. Just inject them with some lethal injection. And he said it and he didn't blink twice. Once again, a Christian. But that's hate. That's hate in your heart. You don't have care and concern for others, that and no compassion. So as the king that hates who he sees as an enemy, and those are in the way of his agenda, and those that don't have loyalty to him as a king, he hates. Talking about Trump, then those that follow him and claim him as their king also demonstrate hate. It is not far to follow. I'm not making these things up. I'm just watching it. I'm watching the fruit. And the fruit is hate being portrayed according to the name of the Lord, because they're choosing a King Cyrus over King Jesus.